Hey there everyone, welcome back. On this channel I help you decide, is that book worth reading of a second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? You're not taking the camera with you again. You'll see in an upcoming video, she took the camera with her last time. So, be calm. I don't know if... Hold on. Look at her. Look at her. She acts like she never gets pet. And I have video evidence you get pet all the time. We reach another month of July. Now, last month was a pretty fun read. I would say that of the various things I read, I haven't quite decided a favorite yet, although it probably will be up. I'll be honest, I'm recording this a little bit before I finish my TBR of last year. I'm going to do a couple TBRs ahead of schedule because I suspect I'll get done with my TBRs a little faster than intended, and I want to be able to jump into the next TBR, but I'm not sure I'll have time to record. So if you see me not talk about the previous month in this month or next month, that's why. For those of you who followed the channel long enough, you know that when it comes to July, I decide, since it's the month of my birth, that I am going to do the nostalgia month. Now, what I do during this month is I take various books from my childhood, the ones I read a lot, the ones that had influence on me, ones I read, in school, and I revisit them. I take off the rose-tinted goggles and see, do those books still hold up? For the most part, they largely have, although there have been a couple where it's like, should have just left this as a memory. Especially with the Daniel X. Like, that was one of those ones where I should have guessed, based on how much I had not liked James Patterson's books as an adult, that the Daniel X book, the one's meant for kids, was probably somehow gonna be worse. Eventually, I will get into the Maximum Ride series and see how badly that held up over the years. But for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and just move on. And for the most part, this is the next month, the Nostalgia Month, where I choose the next set of books. Now, this month is going to have a couple sequels in it because when it comes down to it, I'm starting to get a little pressed for books that I still remember as nostalgia properties. I'm definitely, I could do Harry Potter, but considering that J.K. Rowling has turned into a full-on mustache-twirling villain these days, that it doesn't feel right to do without at least addressing the problem of J.K. Rowling. It's bad when she's so insecure about the fact that she has terrible opinions, she's going to completely refilm. She's okay with completely refilming the movies to have a whole new cast because all the other casts of the movies, the older movies, are like, get away from me. Because of what she's saying online. I'm going to move on here. So I'm not going to review that. And for the most part, most of what I have left is sequels. I can't really talk about the sequels to say Silver Wing, despite the fact that I did really like that book as a kid because for the longest time, I didn't know there were sequels. I found that out 5 years ago. That there were 2 sequels to that book. I also, at a certain point, I'm just reviewing sequels to the books I did read. I have a ton of the Warrior Cats book. I can do at least 12 more videos, 16 just on those. Because I was basically religiously following that series until, let's see, that one. I think the fourth set of 6 is why it fell out halfway through the series. And even then, I'm not sure I completely fell out or I just don't remember the last 3 books in that series. Because that was about the time I did start sort of falling out of love with this series. In addition, Guardians of Ga'Hoole, I read at least till book 7 before I decided this isn't really for me anymore. And of course, I got the Hunger Games sequels and all that. But I'm trying not to just dive into the sequels just yet. Well, I am diving into the sequels, I'm not going to lie. But I don't want to just make this month just entirely sequels. I want to talk about various books. Books that you don't need to watch previous videos to understand the concept of where I'm coming from in some of the reviews. Hell, maybe I'll do this channel long enough that on my 10-year mark, I'll visit the very first books I read for this channel. Because at that point, they'll be nostalgic for me. And I'll be an old man ranting at a camera. I'm an old man ranting at a camera now, I'll be honest with you guys. But that being said, So what will I have for this month? Well, I got a collection. A couple of them are things that I actually found out of, just walking through the bookshelves. I'm like, wait a minute, I remember that book. And it wasn't, like, it's one of those books that you don't remember until you see it. But throughout the various things, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about it. So, the first book that I'm going to read this month is actually one that I read as a kid. I think I was in 4th grade when I first read it. I think it was part actually of a class. It's been a long time since 4th grade, guys. But I do remember it being part of a class because I do remember watching the film adaptation of it a little later. And I actually think that was one of the very first film adaptations I watched of a book I had read first. Because I do specifically remember, wait, they cut out this entire section. Why'd they do that? It's a small book written by a very well-known children's author. It's a Newbery Medal Award winner. And that would be Maniac Magee. Trying to cover the Goodwill tag without covering up the thing. But that would be Maniac Magee. Now, Maniac Magee is a weird book to think about. From what I remember, I'm gonna do this before reading anything on the back here. But from what I remember about Maniac Magee, is that it basically follows a homeless kid named Magee who is constantly running and just doesn't want to be taken in by the state for any reason. So, throughout the book, you follow him through various things. I also remember that the last family he ends up staying with throughout his journey is a family that I don't think would pass any kind of inspection. Let me put it this way. They'd be hardcore Trumper Republicans. And I'm trying to remember how ballsy this book got about showcasing how racist they were, because I remember them being very racist. This book was actually published in, the copyright has it at 1990. So this is probably one of those things that would have flown much easier back then, but definitely would not fly today. But that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and read the back, figure out if I remember it right. Jeffrey Lionel Maniac Magee might have lived a normal life if a trolley accident hadn't made him an orphan. After living with his unhappy and uptight aunt and uncle for 8 years, he decides to run. Not just run away, but run. This is where the myth of Maniac Magee begins, as he changes the lives of a racially divided small town with his amazing and legendary feats. And that's it. That's the back. So, there's really not much to talk about when it comes to the back. I already talked mostly about what I remembered of this book. I do remember a couple things. Honestly, I'm just going to wait until I read the book to really talk about it a little more, because I'm not sure how much what I remember is accurate and how much of it's from the movie, which I know is different from the book. Like, I know the movie just flat out has magic at one point, but the book is largely realistic, as far as I can remember. First book this month will be Maniac Magee. It'll come out on Monday, so it'll be Monday's Maniac Magee. I love alliteration. The second book does largely have a similar reason for why I'm going to read it, in terms of when it comes to an adaptation. Except this time it's going to be in the reverse. This is one of the first books that I read where I watched the adaptation first, found out it was a book, then hunted down the book and read it. I feel like I've said that before, but every time I think I have concretely figured it out, I think I've actually discovered, oh, wait a minute, that was first, wasn't it? So, also, I have ADHD, so, this might just all be me not remembering it in order. I'm terrible with time. I'll believe things happened like a week ago when they really happened like 3 months ago. I'll believe something happened 3 months ago when it was really like a week ago. That's how bad I am with time. So, but anyways, this is one of those books. You guys might remember this movie because it came out around the time that Chronicles of Narnia was big, and it was one of those ones that had one of the most misleading trailers of all time. I remember the movie getting really lambasted because of that. Because while it was a good movie, they tried to convince everyone else it wasn't what it really was to try to bank off the hype of the Chronicles of Narnia at the time. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. This is a winner of the Newbery Medal Award, and it was written by author Catherine Patterson. Catherine Patterson, but with one T, not two, so she's not related to James. But that is Bridge to Terabithia. Now, this is one of those books where one of the core themes is grief and loss. And I read this at about a time that wasn't as hard-hitting as it should have been. I probably read this book when I was a little too old. If I remember right, the movie came out in like 2011, and at that point I was a teenager. Like, just barely a teenager, but I was still a teenager. So I was largely familiar with that concept. The book, I do still remember hitting me on some kind of emotional level, though. Basically, from what I remember of this, I remember that The Bridge to Terabithia is about when a kid named Jesse meets his friend Jane. Don't remember her name, but he makes a new friend who moves into town. Him and this friend have this magical imagination land that they retreat to called Terabithia, which is across the creek, and the two of them go there whenever life is hard. The land of Terabithia is largely a representation of the various struggles they suffer with in their real life. Although I can't say for sure if that's a movie exclusive or the book does it too. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much I'm going to spoil here. But at the end of the day, something tragic happened which causes Jesse to have to learn about grief. I'm going to read the back of the book now and give my thoughts on it. Jesse Aaron's greatest ambition is to be the fastest runner in the 5th grade. It's going to be a weird theme this month, isn't it? Where all the characters are fast runners, isn't it? He's been practicing all summer and can't wait to see his classmates' faces when he beats them all. But on the first day of school, a new goat boldly crosses over to the boys' side of the playground and outruns everyone. That's not a very promising beginning for a friendship. But Jess and Leslie Burke become inseparable. Leslie has imagination. I'm sorry. That's just an awkward sentence we put in the middle of that. Together, she and Jess create Terabithia, a magical kingdom in the woods where the two of them reign as king and queen, and their imaginations are set the only limits. Then one morning a terrible tragedy occurs. Only when Jess is able to come to grips with this tragedy does he finally understand the strength and courage Leslie has given him. Wow, okay, so the book isn't really coy about what the story is about. It doesn't really leave that as a twist later on. If I had to critique the back of the book, that is definitely one thing I would talk about. Cut those final 2 lines. Hold on. Cut those last 2 sentences, or maybe just take off the last sentence, because I remember that tragedy is one of the biggest parts of the book, and like spoiling it that early kind of, I guess it's aimed at kids, so I can't be too harsh on it because the average kid hasn't read as many books as I have, so they probably won't see the tropes coming like I do. Plus, I've already read the book, so this could be a little bit of a confirmation bias. I already know what the twist is, so to me, it's obvious what the book's hinting at. You know, sort of like when you're a DM and you design a puzzle for your players. And you think it's a really simple puzzle, and then your players, you have to wonder how your players graduated school sometimes, you know? That being said, let's move on to the next one. Now, the next one's going to be a little fun, because I've reviewed 2 other books in this series on here. This is one of the sequels I was talking about. But, technically speaking, this is the first book I read in the series. Because, as I've mentioned before, when it comes to certain series that I've come to love greatly, I have actually started more than one directly in the middle and then worked my way backwards. When it comes down to it, this is technically the very first book I've ever read in this series. And that would be The Titan's Curse in Percy Jackson. This is actually the oldest book of the series I have too. Like this book is old. All the other books I got later. This is the very first one I got. I'm almost afraid to be like even slightly rough with this book, because I got this before the Battle of the Labyrinth came out. So this thing is at least almost 20 years old at this point. It feels weird to think about that it's been that long since I've read this book. Well, I've read it a couple times over, but it's been that long since I first read this book, I should say. But yeah, this was the book that introduced me to the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. This was the very first book that sucked me into this world. And that should say something, that book 3 was good enough that it turned me into a fan of the series, despite have not reading book 1 and 2 in the process. And for remember, this book is not shy about continuity. So I'm going to go ahead and skip the whole what I remember of it, because this book is ingrained enough in my memory. I'm positive I remember this fine. In fact, I could probably give you a synopsis without looking on the back. But I'm still going to read the back because, as I've said before, I think it's important to gauge how the book thinks you need to know. You need to build a foundation before you go into the book. The book needs to tell you what to expect and then deliver on that. So, without further ado, here's the back of the book. When Percy Jackson receives an urgent distress call from his friend Grover, he immediately prepares for battle. He knows he'll need his most powerful demigod allies at his side, his trusty bronze sword, Riptide, and a ride from his mom. The demigods race to the rescue to find that Grover has made an important discovery: 2 new powerful half-bloods, whose parentage is unknown. But that's not all that awaits them. The Titan Lord Kronos has set up a devious trap, and the young heroes have fallen prey. Hilarious and action-packed, this third adventure in the series finds Percy Jackson faced with his most dangerous challenge yet, and the chilling prophecy of the Titan's curse. So off the bat, I would say that doesn't really tell you anything about the book. It gives you the very basic synopsis of the first chapters. But the book as a whole is not, I don't think it's well characterized in that synopsis. That being said, I'm obviously not going to do that here. I'm going to wait till I actually talk about the book to give you the full synopsis and explain what I think fits better. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the second sequel I'm going to be reviewing this month. And I'm also going to drink a cup of coffee because my throat is killing me. Yeah, I know, it's a little weird to rant about how awful J.K. Rowling is, and I'm drinking out of a Gryffindor cup. But I promise you that none of the money I spent on this went to J.K. Rowling. I got it at a thrift store, which is actually where I got my Harry Potter series at too. So I have the entire series without J.K. Rowling earning a cent. Anyways, the next book is a book I've actually reviewed on this. The next book is a sequel to a book I reviewed on this channel. It wasn't done last year, but it was done the year before that. And largely, it wasn't a very well-received video, admittedly. I think it's still sitting only at 30 views, despite being out for like 2 years. But this channel is for me. And while I do enjoy when videos get really big, I largely do this for myself. So I'm going to be reading the sequel of this series. And I remember the sequel being a lot better than the first book. Now, the first book I gave it a lot of praise. But the sequel, I think, really ups the stakes. It introduces a lot of new characters. It also has heavy circumstances for what happened. I think these books are largely unappreciated. And considering how much I've been in the zombie genre this year, I figure it's only fair that I review Flesh and Bone, the sequel to Rotten Rune. Wait. Hold on. Not Flesh and Bone. So, not this. I got my titles mixed around, and it's actually Dust and Decay that I'll be reading this year, not Flesh and Bone. So I'm not gonna stop this video to go get the book I have on my shelf. If I have the book, I might not have Dust and Decay, but I'm already committed. I've already planned it out. I'm going to read this book, so I'll just be looking it up online, and if I can't find it, I will be ordering it. Okay, so what I remember of Dust and Decay is that it is a pretty good sequel to the Rotten Rune. I do think I remember it well enough that I don't want to say here, but basically it follows Charlie and his brother. I don't know why I said Charlie. I know his name is Benny. Charlie, I think, was the antagonist. As you can see, sometimes names get mixed up in my head. But I'm not going to go into it here. I do think I remember it well enough. I at least very much remember all the twists of the book, if not necessarily all the meat in the middle. But largely speaking, I'm going to go ahead and just read the synopsis I found online. A New York Times best-selling author and multiple Bram Stoker Award winner, Marvel Comics writer Jonathan Mayberry continues the story he began in Rotten Rune. 6 months have passed since Benny Amura and Nix Riley learned that flesh-eating zombies aren't the scariest and most dangerous monsters around. Now, Benny's brother Tom is training them in the art of zombie whacking. But as they plan to leave and find a better future, a zombie attack puts a crimp on their plans. And soon, they discover an old enemy they believed long gone may actually still be alive. And that's about where I have to say on it. Speaking naturally, fun thing, I read Dust and Decay, but it was actually Flesh and Bone that I never got around to reading. So while I know the Dust and Decay, how it goes and how it ends, I can't actually say that I'm familiar with how the series itself ends. And I know it's an unpopular opinion based on what I saw online, but I actually really did like Tom's philosophy in the first book, in that zombies aren't just monsters to be killed, that every zombie has a person behind them who once loved them, and that to just treat them like playthings is the equivalent of digging up someone's ancestor and using their skull as a kickball. That we need to be, the zombies need to be put down, but they still need to be respectful about it. So I thought that was a pretty interesting philosophy to take on the zombie thing. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Well, actually not continue on, because that's the last book I have this month. Apart from the books I read, I do have other plans this month. You are definitely going to see at least one more, yes, that was a book video on this, but I'm going to aim for more than one. I'm not going to tell you which ones in case I don't get it done, but I'm aiming for more than one of those. And I hope they're popular. The Jumanji one got a lot of traction, but I know one of the ones coming up is going to be a much more niche one, so I suspect it's probably not going to get as much attention as the Jumanji did. I'm also going to try and get out another one. Again, not going to spoil, but just in case I don't actually get it out. I've made too many false promises on this channel. I don't want to keep doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. With that being said, I don't have much else to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know the TBRs don't do very well, but I like putting them out because, again, I make my videos for me. So later, everyone.